Welcome back, everybody. This is Learn with Bruce and Eddie. Say hi, Eddie.
Hey, guys.
So well done if you're here and you've listened to the prior ones, or maybe you're just here for our most juicy of the podcast. So this is episode 9. This is the last one we're going to do, I guess, in this series. We just thought that we might maybe bring on have a guest. And anyway, I'm sure there'll be maybe some more things that we can talk about. Hopefully you've enjoyed listening to these podcasts. If you haven't, sorry. We'll try better next time. So this episode is, we were just talking. This is maybe the one that I feel like the most nervous about talking about.
It's the most exposing, isn't it?
It is the most exposing. So we're going to talk about mind-altering substances, which includes alcohol. So maybe you listened to episode 1 and you heard a little bit about our backstories. If not, feel free to go and do that. So by way of introduction, why don't we do that? So why don't you introduce what you do now and maybe just give us a little nugget in terms of your prior relationship with mind-altering substances?
Well, now I help people to live better through the medium of movement and mindset coaching. And I wish I had me back 10, 20 years ago. Right. I wish I had someone to come along and show me some stuff and help me understand,
navigate
it, because I've had a relationship with mind-altering substances from a very young age and through various different substances as my life progressed. Should we get into that? Should we just talk about
that's really good. So, and just from my point of view, I coach people. I help them make breakthroughs in their health and fitness. I've gone on a journey myself with health and fitness, and my aim is to help people just really start thriving and bring a bit of balance back into their lives. My business is called Statera Fitness, and Statera is actually Latin for balance. And like you, I did a 12-step program for addiction to cocaine in 2017. So that's my nugget. That ended quite badly, but actually, in a way, actually really well, because it was the best thing that ever happened to me then, which kind of sounds a bit paradoxical, but is what it is. But I was introduced to mind-altering substances also at a very early age. I mean, like most of us, dabble and we, because we try and we experiment, don't we? And I think actually that's, a good place to start, isn't it? Like, why is it you think that we do that as young people? I mean, some people, they might have had their first exposure encounter in their 20s, other people it's in their teens, whatever,
I think it depends on the environment and what you're growing up with and what you're being exposed to from a young age. So I think that's just the thing that separates whether someone falls into it in their later life or earlier life. I grew up in an area where smoking weed was like everyone smoked weed. You go out in the streets, it just smells like weed. I also grew up with older brothers. So my brothers were 3 years older than me. So when I'm 8 years old, I'm rolling around with 11-year-olds. When I was 12, I was with 15-year-olds. So I always had this sort of older influence. And even with weed was just normal. From lots of family members smoked it. My best mate's dad smoked it. So weed wasn't. I didn't even see it as a drug back then. It was no different from alcohol or cigarette.
Eddie grew up in Brixton, by the way. Which, if anyone's been to Brixton, you'll know that smell you get immediately from the underground.
Yeah. When I was growing up, it was way more prominent than it is now. Since we've been highly gentrified in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah, you probably smell more like Old Spice now. Yeah. Insurance break coming home from work.
But I remember my youngest, my oldest memory I can remember of any type of drugs was rolling spliffs for my mate's dad. So he used to come home from work. We must have been 6 or 7. And he would come home from work. He was a chef. So he'd be up in this restaurant. So we'd be up late playing computer games because, his dad wasn't there. Then he'd come home and he'd get us to make him, I remember it so vividly, make me a cheese sandwich and a spliff. And he used to smoke hash. So me and my mate Harry would be like, right, wicked, one of us would make the cheese sandwich and then we'd get down and, I'd be burning the hash and he'd be getting the cigarettes ready we mixing it up, and we've been trying to roll it, and his dad would be giving us pointers like, you know, you got to own that Rizla, you got to hold it tight, and teaching us how to roll. We never even thought about smoking it, you know. But that was my first experience of just rolling these hash spliffs for my mate's dad. And then it wasn't until a couple years later, we must have been 8 or 9 years old, it was like, maybe we can nick one of them and have a smoke. So I was about 8 or 9 when I had my first toke of a spliff.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's young, man.
It's crazy. Absolutely crazy. But it was just normal. Where I was growing up in that time, this is the early 90s, in that environment, it was just quite normal. By the time I was 12, I was smoking weed regularly. You know, my brothers were smoking, just everyone was smoking. We were going out to the park and smoke, and I fell in love with it. Weed's been a massive part of my life, even up to now. Completely different relationship with it. And a lot of people, you know, you can hear like gateway drugs and whatnot. You know, I smoked weed from 12 till about 18 years old, and only then did I start dabbling with Class A's. It wasn't a gateway for me. Class A's came from a whole different. The gateway to Class A's was actually emotional injury. It was coming out of a relationship, and that was my gateway. But then once I crossed over to Class A's, then, you know, I was like a kid in a sweet shop. And it quickly got out of control, as it does. So yeah, I've had this sort of long-standing relationship with drugs, and they had a control over me for most of my life. And now I'm at a period in my life where I have control over them.
Yeah,
and I think that's the switch.
Yeah, it's horrible when you are a slave to something. I hope, you know, nobody listening to this has to experience that. I'm sure lots of us, though, can relate to that. You know, it can be cigarettes, it can be, you know, sugar, it can be drugs, it can be women, it can be clothes. You know, there's lots of things which can get hold on us. And I think, you mentioned about a traumatic event, right, or a life event. I think for me, having experienced sort of being an addict, and, you know, I wasn't like a daily user, and I never did things like heroin. I think sometimes when we use this word like drug addict, you know, this image pops up into our head of somebody with like syringes hanging out their arms. You know, you can get addicted to weed. I don't see it being like as highly addictive as something like cocaine, which is fucking highly addictive. But I think for a lot of people who have some kind of trauma, whether it's like a little T or a big T, because, you know, you can obviously, you know, trauma is subjective. You know, if you've never experienced major trauma, then something that for one person is less traumatic is still going to be, you know, quite traumatic for you. So, and I think I was certainly like numbing some things, and I found it useful, like escape, and I found it a useful way to cope with just. I also had quite a lot of stress in my life. I had a, you know, mad job that was very stressful. And it was my way of actually switching off of work. And you know, we talked about this on the last podcast in terms of like the brainwaves. I feel like when I was doing loads of blow and loads of booze, I could actually switch off. I could just kind of like move into this, like, everything's funny. I haven't got a care in the world, and I'm just on one. And I just never wanted that to end. You know, I didn't want that to end because I found it so cathartic being in that state of mind, obliterated. So it's no wonder that I literally didn't stop for like, you know, 2-3 days. So cool. Yeah. I mean, so yes, you talked about that, and then I think we got to kind of like throw alcohol into the mix as well. What's your relationship with booze been like? What's your relationship like with it now?
My relationship with booze has always been generally all right. Again, I grew up in a household where drinking was normal. Like, you know, my mum's grew up in Portugal, so she's kind of got like a European sort of stance on alcohol. So we were given small glasses of beer when we were 6 or 7 at a dinner table. We were given a sip of wine. So alcohol had never had this like elusive temptation that I saw other children have when it was like restricted from them. So I never fell into that whole going to the park and drinking bottles of vodka and whatnot. I never did that because we could always have a little drink at home. It wasn't this forbidden fruit. So I remember hitting that age of like 13, 14, and everyone starts drinking at school. You got to go into house parties and they're getting absolutely paralytic because they've never had that opportunity. So I've always had like a good relationship with alcohol. And I wasn't really a big drinker until I started doing cocaine. I was always a hippie, man. I was always just wanted to smoke weed. When I was 18, my friends wanted to go to the pub. I was like, can I smoke a joint there? If I can't smoke a joint, I'm not gonna come to the pub. So I didn't really get into drinking culture. And again, because it wasn't this forbidden fruit. But at this time, all of my mates are doing cocaine, doing all types of drugs. And I just wasn't into it. I had a long-term relationship. I was about 16, 17 at this time. I was happy just being at home with my missus, smoking a few joints. And then we broke up. And I was just heartbroken. And I was like, right, let's go out. Get me some of that.
Yeah.
And then
it's almost like a fuck you, isn't it? Like,
fuck you.
Like, it's almost like, right, I'm already in pain. So, if I feel like I come down, I mean, that's better. At least that's better than what I'm feeling now. That can't be worse.
Yeah, 100%. So I still remember, I used to like just have a bit of my mates. Escalate so quickly, doesn't it? So it goes from having a bit of your mates to you going to your mate, oh, can you get me my own bit, to eventually saying, can I have his number?
Yeah.
Now you've got the dealer's number. Now you can call him at any time.
And my uncle said something really interesting to me when I finally opened up to him about 2 years after going sober, or maybe a bit less. And I finally said to him, the reason I haven't been drinking for the last 2 years? And he was like, why? I said, well, I had a problem with cocaine. We had a nice conversation. Uncle is quite, I also want to describe him, I don't know if bohemian is the right word, but, he lives in West London and he's partial to this and that. And he likes a bit of a party at Notting Hill Carnival and what have you. And so I knew I could talk to him about this stuff. And he just turned to me and he said, yeah, cocaine, man. He said, yeah, it's the one drug I just steer clear of. Mm-hmm. He said, I never saw the point in doing a drug that just made you want to do more of it. And I was like, where were you like fucking 10 years ago? Like, if I could have been told that, but I probably still would have done it because I had to learn, for myself. Yeah, it's like once you try it, there's something about that.
It's very Moorish.
Yeah, it's very Moorish, yeah. Which, is like, it's not, you just end up chasing that previous line. And then once you build up a tolerance to it, then you have to start doing more of it to get that same high that you once. Now for me, it's just a terrible, terrible drug. I really stay well clear of it. And I think it's very damaging. But yeah, I think what you mentioned there about the forbidden fruit, I think that's massive. For me, the naughtiness of doing drugs because they are illegal gave me a massive buzz. That was definitely part of it. The shady meeting of the guy down a side street opposite the boozer, coming in, being very clandestine or thinking you're being very clandestine. That was gave me a buzz, added to the buzz. I do think our laws around this stuff are quite draconian. I think, when you look at other countries like Portugal, I mean, the incidence now of, overdose and crime associated with it's just all dropped since they decriminalised it. You got to ask, why is that? And I think it's, because when it's below the radar, when people are, doing it in that way, it just, I don't know, something. It's the forbidden fruit, like you said. But I also want to pick up on, you mentioned about skinning up the hash leaf, and you talked quite nicely about that, like the ritual of skinning it up. I love the sound of a night having a cheese sandwich and a hash spliff. Yeah. Love it. But like a bit of weed now. I mean, I don't really smoke it because I try not to have any tobacco. Yep. Being an ex-smoker. I don't want to get back on that shit. But, I have a device, a Pax 3, which sort of, vaporizes it essentially. Gummies, I'm partial to a gummy. I think like your intention and like, and how you kind of, for me, it's a natural, it's a plant. So, and I think I approach it, one, with respect. Yep. Whereas before, I had no respect for any of these mind-altering substances. Alcohol was just a way to get obliterated. Yep. I did not drink alcohol to get a little bit uninhibited. I drank alcohol to get fucking plastered. Yeah. I remember having conversations with mates going, what are we doing tonight? I think we should get arseholed. Yeah. Like, it's such a weird
Where's
intention.
that come from? Yeah.
But it was all, I think it's all bravado, and I think it's all like, again, it was just being naughty and wanting to experiment with this stuff.
Push the boundaries.
The boundaries, yeah. Being rebellious, part of growing up. But I think people to this day still drink to get drunk. And I think you have to really ask yourself some serious questions, about why it is that you're doing that, what it is you're trying to escape, what it is maybe that's lacking in your life.
Yeah.
That means, that's something that you feel is like, a good recreational fucking pursuit. But the ritual and like your intention and kind of your relationship with these things, I think I think that has a lot to do with the criminality of it. But, for me, that's a big, big thing. Treat these things with a lot of respect. I have respect for cocaine. I don't touch it. I have respect for, other things, MDMA, ketamine. I have respect for the fact that now they're being used, therapeutically. I think they do still have a role to play in my life. Every now and again, I like a festival over the summer, and every now and again, and I'll get a little bit loose on these things. With alcohol, funnily enough, even though in the same environment where I might be doing these things, I actually prefer to not drink so much alcohol. So I really don't drink alcohol anymore, but I will drink it at festivals. I tend to have like a shandy, or I oscillate between like an alcoholic drink and then a non-alcoholic drink. Why? Because I don't actually want to get drunk. The taste is quite nice, the level of inhibition, and therefore what conversations you can maybe have, or the level of relaxation. I think I'm always quite interested with this like theory of like the stoned ape theory, right? This idea that we were roaming around, and one of the breakthroughs in terms of our brain development was when we stumbled across magic mushrooms, and then we took them, and then something happened in terms of our neuroplasticity. Something changed. Again, mushrooms, a lot of time for mushrooms, and
if used correctly.
If used correctly. And I don't even regard them as a drug. I mean, I know the government does. I don't. Why would I regard a fucking mushroom as a drug? It's ridiculous. So, but it has a psychoactive element. Of course, I understand that. I mean, that's why I take them. But so I think that I've totally lost my point.
I think you've touched on a few good points, actually, because, from my experience, and I've pretty much got a fucking PhD in taking drugs, and I could, go down the road about how drugs, ruined parts of my life, and I've had all these, I've had some really hard times on drugs before, but I've also had some fucking amazing times.
Yeah.
And I've had some times that have changed my life, and relationships I've made, and experiences I've had, and I like to come away from this idea like drugs are bad. And I'm not saying that they're good either. And I don't actually think anything in life is inherently good or bad. It's how we approach the thing, how we use the thing. And you mentioned relationship. And I don't think drugs are a problem. I think the relationship people have with the drugs is the problem. And I don't think drugs are the culprit, the offender. I think it's the trauma that's the offender. The trauma, not the offender, the culprit that leads us to, to maybe fall into a bad relationship with drugs. But I don't actually think drugs are the problem. And if we can control or build healthy relationships with them, they can actually be used as a tool. I've had some fantastic times drinking 1 or 2 beers with my partner, loosening up, having some really deep conversations without having to get smashed. I've had some great times with some of my best mates on MDMA at a festival. And I've had some great times using mushrooms. But I've also, when my relationships with these substances aren't in check, had horrendous times on them as well. And I think we can't point the finger at the drug and go, that was the problem. Actually, I was the problem.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally.
And these things can be, there's a fine line between when something is medicine and poison. Weed can be very therapeutic, and it can also completely fuck your life.
Yeah.
Right. But the weed isn't the problem.
Yeah.
We are the problem. The way that we are using these substances and approaching these substances is the problem. And if we can, we've both said if someone came to us 10 years ago and said some of this stuff to us, it would have helped us massively. Because we criminalize drugs, the awareness around them isn't there. We're not really allowed to talk about it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of shame around it as well. But if we can, alleviate that shame and bring more awareness and an understanding of how to use these things properly, because MDMA is being used now therapeutically. Ketamine is being used therapeutically. Once upon a time, cocaine was used therapeutically as well. If you look back through history, because cocaine's been around for a very, very long time. So I think it's our approach to these substances is the most important thing. And as long as we are in control and we are using the substance and opposed to being out of control and the substance using us, then we could have positive experiences.
Yeah. I just want to caveat that. I think like coke we might be used. The version of cocaine, so like street cocaine, I don't think has any practical.
Oh no, you used to use
medicinal.
medically in the 20s.
Right. Okay. So, but then back then it was. Probably,
but it would have been pure.
Yeah.
Not shit you get now.
Now, I mean, half the stuff, that you could potentially buy on the street. It's just not cocaine.
No.
And I would know because I got lifted by the police once, and they tested it and they told me. But anyway, let's not go into that because my mum might be listening. So yeah, I think I think it's like, I think it's absolutely down to the individual. I think you got to ask yourself, like, why am I doing this thing, and be really honest with yourself. And I think this is the sad thing, and I think this is why there's quite a lot of embarrassment and shame, because there's lots of people obviously doing this stuff for a variety of reasons. Some might be, healthy, but quite a lot of them are unhealthy. And so it's really hard to break away from that when it's just so rife and it's so mainstream. The fact that I don't drink now, really, I mean, it's still sometimes when I tell people that, I can just tell they're like, why do you have a problem with it? It's like, well, no, it's just a choice. But it really baffles people. I don't understand why you make that choice. And I think for me, it's because I've really done a lot of work on myself, and I know and I've seen when I'm doing stuff. I'm doing this because like everybody else is doing it, and that's so I just don't want to be the odd person out. I mean, that's sad. Or it might be because I just don't really have enough going on in my life, or I'm using it to sort of like treat how I feel because I don't quite feel good about myself. I think there are a lot of people who are doing that, which is where I think the embarrassment and I think the shame comes in. But I think people have to really kind of get honest with themselves and look at like, what is the net gain of doing this thing? Like, what's the net outcome? Like, are you gaining? Are you actually losing? I think, for me, one of the big reasons why I decided to stop drinking is, one, I've never really been one for having like one or two.
Yep.
I'm more of a 5 to 15 and then let's fucking call it on and like fucking go out kind of guy. So, so I just choose not to, drink because, I know if I had that first one, it's going to whet my appetite for more. So, and then once you end up having more, if you're the type of person that can't say no just to one, the next day, the level of productivity is seriously stifled. And then, I also, because now I work in the health and fitness space and I want to maintain a healthy physique, what alcohol does in terms of your diet is, really damaging. One, it's just, quite a lot of empty calories. Yeah. So there's not protein or anything, healthy that supports, systems. And it actually is just basically a pint of carbs. But it also triggers the release of ghrelin, which is the hungry hormone, and that's why you want to have a kebab, and then the next day you want to have a pizza and packet Haribo and all the rest of it. So I think it's really sad how much it kind of damages people's health, and I think how it damages what people can achieve. And I think it's something that people who are drifting kind of turn to. I think one of the big things that can really alleviate a need, desire, or a thought pattern to drink and every night or drink every weekend is a lack of drive or purpose. I'm extremely grateful that I've got fitness goals, and people will potentially listen to this and think, well, you just replace one addiction with the other. And ostensibly you might be right, but I know which one was going to kill me quicker, going to the gym or doing cocaine.
Yeah.
So I think having a sense of like purpose and something that allows a reason for you to say no.
My friend put this really well, is that you have to find something that's better than taking drugs.
Yes,
right. You've got to find something that makes you feel, because doing cocaine, doing everything, you're going to feel really fucking. At some point, it's going to make you feel on top of the world.
Yeah, euphoric, and
exactly. So you got to find something that outweighs that. You got to find something that's actually, that thing I want to do on Saturday morning makes me feel way better than this whole thing I'm doing on Friday night. And that was the pivotal moment for me, was finding something that made me feel better, that I could focus on, that gave me a reason to say no on a Friday night and then no on the Saturday night. And I think that was the pivotal moment. And you're right about finding the purpose. I think with men in particular, because I can't speak for women because I'm not one, but for men in particular, I think there's a lot of shame, because when you're addicted, it's a lack of control, it's a weakness, perceived weakness. And men have a lot of problem with being seen as weak. So it's very, I could not admit to my friends that I had a problem.
Yeah. I didn't even admit to my friends that I had a problem until I'd already admitted to loads of random people.
Yeah.
I had a problem. It wasn't until 6 months into recovery that then I found the strength to start to open up to my closest mates.
Yeah.
That's batshit crazy.
So the power is owning it and letting people know that, wow, okay, I've got this problem and I need help with it, and I'm going to focus on it, and then finding that purpose, that drive, that thing that makes you feel better than the drugs. And genuinely, something that's going to make you feel better is something that's nourishing for you, something that's physical, like something that's good for your body, good for your soul. Because hanging out in people's kitchens at 6 a.m. is not good for the soul.
Yeah, no, it's not. No,
it's not good.
Definitely not good for your prospects. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's it. I think I mentioned about being slaves to stuff. I just don't want to be a slave to anything. I really want to make sure that nothing has a hold over me anymore. Like the turning point where I actually wasn't dependent on any one person, because it can also be a person or a thing, was when I really felt comfortable being by myself. I felt really comfortable with who I was and my own company, so that I didn't need anything to kind of escape
from, run away from. Yeah.
And that was a big turning point. And I think, if people are listening to this and they do feel like they have a dependency or something, we're not saying like, you can fucking sort yourself out and like you're a loser. You can actually admit defeat and start to distance yourself from this thing. And actually that shouldn't be seen as a failure. A defeat, saying you're defeated by something, for me, is like a step then towards, succeeding. You kind of sometimes have to, lose the battle or lose the bottle, in order to win the war, And yeah, I think we should maybe also maybe we should have said this at the start, but neither Eddie and I are doctors or like medical professionals. We're certainly not pharmaceuticalists, although we've definitely behaved like maybe we were. So we're just talking about like our experiences. But is there anything else that you think you want to?
One thing, maybe I like to just tap on one thing, because both of us have been through a long period of addiction. I had 10 years or so of addiction, and my drug addiction was the worst and the best thing that ever happened to me. And that's really important to understand. And just this concept in life in general kind of taps in earlier, how nothing's inherently good or bad. It was the worst and the best thing that happened to me, because it's made me who I am now. And because of all of my experiences, it has led to me to this moment, sat on this podcast with Bruce talking about this. So I couldn't wish for any of it to change. So if anyone's listening to this and you are grappling with your addiction to whatever it is, know that it's all working out for you, and you are supposed to go through this to come out the other end.
Yeah,
I think that's really, really important. So instead of wishing things were different, accepting things for how they are, understanding that this is part of your journey, but you can journey through and out of this into the other end as well. Because I spent a long time wishing it away, and that's not the way. As soon as I owned it and I admitted to it and I accepted it, I was able to move through and past my addiction.
Yeah, unfortunately, there is this thing of you'll only make these changes when you're ready. And we used to talk about this in recovery about everybody just needs to get you. It only happens when you get to your rock bottom.
Yeah.
Which might sound a bit dreary for people who are sort of grappling with stuff. People in recovery circles, like really experienced people. I used to talk to them about, my mate is like, has talked to me about his, because when you go sober, people then want to talk to you about their own. They open up about their bad relationships with stuff. Like you're some kind of fucking guru, or like you've got. It's like, well, like I can just tell you my experience, mate, and like, but I'm really glad. I'm very grateful that people can open up to me about that. It's a gift, what I kind of went through, that people can now talk to me about their own problems. But then I go and talk to kind of like the elders of the recovery group, and they would literally just say to me, like, cool, leave him alone.
Yeah.
I'd be like, well, what do you mean? Like, I think he needs help. I want to get him. If he wants to come here, he'll come here. Yeah. But you can't force him. When he's ready, when he's had his rock bottom, when he's had enough and he's waving the white flag, that's when, So I'm not saying that everybody has to go meetings, but there's an inflection point where you're gonna maybe make a decision. Okay, this thing isn't serving me anymore. But you might not be there yet. You might have to get to a place. And I really like what you said about there's no right or wrong. I think this is where acceptance comes in. Like, you just have to if there's no point in having a drink and then really beating yourself up about it. Because that is going to feed the shame, and then that's going to basically feed this thing that's going to just make you want to drink even more. I think it's just something that at some point there's an inflection point which is going to happen. I think maybe, if anyone listening to this is struggling with stuff, I certainly would recommend, reaching out to Cocaine Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous. They have helplines. You can talk to people. They will have suggestions for what you can do. But otherwise, if you feel like you're able to maybe navigate out of it, and it's not that sort of serious or all-consuming, things like exercise, things like talking therapy can all help just to maybe bring a bit of awareness. The talking therapy can help bring a bit of awareness around what you're doing, so you can start taking responsibility. I think the fitness thing is, what you mentioned, is another way to feel good. Is another way to feel like, you don't have to do these things. I think a lot of it for me is down to, dopamine, is down to this short-term need for some kind of reward, satisfaction. We finish the day, we crack open a beer or a bottle of wine. Okay, great. But what do you swap that with? You have to swap that with, for me anyway, this delayed gratification. Yeah. So, in the short term, I don't make these choices. I resist the urge to make these impulses because I have a bigger, greater goal, which is further down the line. Now, it's quite hard to reprogram your brain towards that longer term goal, but things like journaling will massively help with that. I think we did an episode on that, didn't we? And then slowly but surely, maybe you'll find yourself just starting to say no to, cracking open the bottle of wine every night. Maybe you can just stop doing that for one night, or 2 nights or 3 nights, and it just you just start to distance yourself. Progress is never linear. It might be up and down. You might have mad sessions and then curse yourself, but just get back on and move in the direction that you want to move in. Me and Eddie will always be open to talking to you about how we can work with you. We've talked on previous episodes about coaching and about what we do, and we have backgrounds, and we can relate to this kind of stuff. I think you have to be ready to sort of make those changes before being in a position to kind of put in action. But anyway, what a heavy last episode. I feel like making some silly joke now, but I'm not going to for once in my life. So that concludes series 1. So thanks very much for listening, for being here. Watch this space in terms of more episodes to come. Any final thoughts?
Thanks for listening to us, if you made it this far.
Yeah. We hope you enjoyed us chatting through these topics. We hope you got something from it. And big love, everyone. We'll see you all soon.
See you soon.